Okay.
All right, well, good. Now that
All right. We're gonna talk about the history of clarinet playing in America with the man who invented jazz, Dr. Jazz.
First of all, the early clarinet players, I'll use something called the Albert system clarinet compared to the modern Bain system clarinet, which at least in the northern hemisphere, the Bain system became popular by the later 1920s. There's still a German system, the Euler system, which is similar. The holes are farther apart, the bore is larger, has a much more rich, penetrating sound. And the opening to Rhapsody in Blue was played by Mr. Gorman, who played it on Albert clarinet. You know what? I want to do another take.
Okay, go ahead.
That was a hokey read.
Take two. We're here with Dr. Jazz, the man who invented jazz. And it's just the beginning of, it's just that chronologically we're going through the history of clarinets?
Well, I'll cover some early jazz and ragtime styles, and then I'll move on to more swing and maybe even bebop styles.
You're doing a lot of gigs, though, around town, though, right? Besides Nietzsche's, all Sundays except the first Sunday of the month, right?
That's right.
You're playing all over the place. You're playing, like, department stores.
Sure.
Churches.
We're at Adam Meldrum and Anderson's. We're
Right.
at the Henger's store.
Henger's and Sattlers.
Sattlers.
And Sears and Roebuck.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So what are you going to do now? Are you going to try to take two?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's make it happen this time. Make it so.
Okay. This is a clarinet. I'm sure you know that.
Right.
It's called an Albert fingering system, which is different. This was more of an 1800s fingering system. It has a larger bore. I'm a large bore, too.
No, don't say that. You're a wonderful, delightful gentleman.
And the holes are farther apart, which made it, unfortunately, very difficult for women and children to play because their fingers wouldn't fit it. So this is a standard B-flat clarinet. This and the other ones I'm going to show are buffets. They were all made in the 1890s, and they were played by my wife's great-grandfather, Eugene Marquith, who was very well known at the time, made cylinders in the Thomas Edison recording studio, played with John Philip Sousa, Arthur Pryor, and
so these are actually made more for men, not for anybody else. It's like they're actually made for men because they figured women and children didn't want to play them.
Well, the Bain system came out in the mid-1800s. The holes were closer together and had a different sound, but it really didn't catch on anywhere except in France and Belgium. So generally, it was very hard for women and children to play clarinet unless they played the little E-flat clarinet, which looks almost like a toy. However, it's very high-pitched. It has a rather harsh tone. I'll show you that later. So this is regular B-flat clarinet, and Tom Gorman was Paul Whiteman's main clarinet player. He played Albert's system like this. Most of the players, right up until the late 20s, played Albert. It's got some more difficult fingerings, but the tone is much edgier and much richer. So that's why I've played it for a long time. Now you can slip and slide a lot easier. That's called glissando. And also the upper edge is very edgy. And the bottom is a little reedier sounding.
Are young people digging your Dr. Jazz and the jazz books?
Yes, they are.
Are you surprised? Because that seems like it's so non-21st century.
Well, we play very hot jazz vaudeville music from the late 1920s, and it's so much fun and it's such toe-tapping music that it's kind of infectious. Everybody likes it, and nobody's heard anything like it because it's so old.
It's so old it's new.
Yeah, the only surviving people to go, oh yeah, I remember that music, would have to be almost 100 years old.
Right, so they could probably not even hear it.
That's true.
Yeah. What other clarinets do you have to show us?
Well, I have, now that's a B flat. This is the regular clarinet.
Right, regular clarinet. Do they call them regular clarinets?
Well, it's just called B flat clarinet.
Right.
Or clarinet in general.
Clarinet in general, right.
This is a clarinet in the key of A. A is 1/2 step deeper than B flat, and you can see it's a tiny bit longer.
What about people like me that aren't musical? Will we be able to tell the difference between the sounds?
Well,
we have to study it for a while because it wouldn't be obvious to us, right?
If you have a little bit of an ear for music. Now, the A clarinet, even though it's a 1/2 step lower, is surprisingly deeper sounding. Not quite as edgy.
It is deeper sounding, you're right.
Yep, just a 1/2 step. And this is a very rare C clarinet. It's in the key of C.
Have these all been used all at the same time? I mean, were they all invented at the same time?
Yes, I mean these all gradually grew from the very late 1700s. You start seeing the first clarinets. They had all open holes.
So why was it called clarinet when it was invented in the 1700s?
Yeah, that's a French name. It was originally clarinet.
And what is it like the person's name, like René Clarinet?
Nobody really knows.
Oh, you don't know it? Yeah.
The instrument sort of grew up by various instrument makers. There was no one inventor. It's probably grew out of the recorder.
Right. The recorder was first, and the clarinet, that's like in a more elaborate version?
Yeah.
Of the recorder?
And then Mozart wrote the first great pieces for clarinet. It's Clarinet Concerto, which was in 1790 or so. And that was really the first great piece written with clarinet in mind. And it was played on a much more primitive instrument than these.
Was that like a clarinet orchestra playing it, or one clarinet player?
There would be a solo clarinet with a small symphony orchestra, maybe 20 pieces.
You must like barbershop quartets too, right? I guess not.
Now, the C clarinet,
Yeah.
the only person I can think of in jazz history was more of a ragtime player, Mr. Alcide Nunez from New Orleans. He was a Creole, and he played the C clarinet. It's not as deep, it's a little bit higher. And finally, what's been called the piccolo clarinet, or the E-flat clarinet. This is still in use today, along with the A and B-flat. You never hear of a C clarinet at all. So the E-flat clarinet is much, much different sounding. And several jazz great players use these, Jimmy Dorsey being one of them.
Oh, yeah, of course, Jimmy Dorsey.
That's the lowest note it can hit.
Okay.
So many of the early players, in fact, all the early players played Albert system, and the ones who were still playing Albert system changed over generally in the 1920s. The BAME system sound became more popular. It's rounder, a little more concentrated, not as reedy or harsh. But the Germans still play an Euler system, which is similar to the Albert, large bore, holes far apart. It's a very nicely engineered Albert system. And the thing with the Albert is you do have some difficult fingerings. Clarinet players forked fingerings like this if you play the low B flat, which makes it more difficult to play.
Well, that's a challenge then, right?
Yeah, it is.
So you enjoy a challenge.
Yep, and when I studied under one of the world's great teachers in Buffalo named Marvin Kamm, and he taught me BAME system, the modern clarinet.
Is he dead?
Oh yeah, he's been dead a long time. He died after I told him one of my jokes.
I'm sorry. What joke was it?
I can't remember. It was so bad, I've forgotten it.
Did you actually give him a heart attack or
I think so.
brain aneurysm?
Yeah.
You think so? Do you feel so? You feel remorse about that?
Yes, I do.
Oh my God! I'm sorry. We brought up him.
So anyhow,
Brought him up. Brought up him.
brought up. It's
I'm
like-
good at English.
Yeah, it's more like German grammar.
Yeah, that was more like German grammar.
I had a German grammar, but she's dead now.
She's dead too. I had a German grammar. She's dead.
Yeah.
Her name was Loretta Hornbacher.
Ooh.
Yes, and she was a real stickler for detail. Like many, she was actually, well, she was from Germany because when she was a little girl, she was actually in Germany before she came here, and then she grew up in the 20th century, and then she got older and older, and then she died.
What did you do? What did she do in the war?
In the war, she was a housewife in West Seneca, or no, in the east side of Buffalo.
Oh, you're just covering that up, aren't you?
She was like Mata Hari, I guess, probably.
Well, anyhow, early clarinet styles, like a ragtime style. Say if you were a clarinet player playing leading edge music of, say, 1915, you might do a Now that's a little bit of Orange Blossom Rag that was written by Mr. Nunez from New Orleans. And then as the jazz of, you notice how stiff that was, like Scott Chaplin. Da 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 da. It's all a lot of short, long phrases. Da 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 da.
Is stiff bad?
Pardon?
Is stiff bad?
Musically, it's more of a military style.
So you like it a little looser and hotter yourself.
Well, the jazz, which became swing, by the mid-1920s, they reversed that. Da 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 da. It became da 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 da. Long, short, long, short, long, short. And that's what invents that nice, lazy, dancing, swingy style.
Right. And you like a nice, simple lyric, right? I mean, when I see you when you do vocals, it's a nice, simple lyric. There's no, like "I love you, baby," that kind of thing.
Well, that's how songs were written then.
Yeah.
They were.
Was that just because they couldn't write more complicated lyrics because they were simpletons back 100 years ago?
No, I mean,
or it was
George and Ira Gershwin wrote some pretty complex lyrics. Rodgers and Hart wrote stuff that almost sounds like Shakespeare. But generally, music in the 20s was fun. There was nothing very serious.
Well, music nowadays is fun, correct? Music being made nowadays that's new is fun, correct?
I don't know anything about what's being made today. I'm sorry.
You gave up on it, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have any regrets that you gave up on listening to newer pop music?
No, not at all.
Do you still sit when you're not playing? Do you at home? And on the go? Do you listen to old classics from the 20s and 30s?
I listen to my record collection.
And is that old classics from the 20s and 30s?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So you have vinyl.
Well, this is before vinyl. This is shellac.
Oh, you have shellac.
Yeah,
those are really hard, right? They're really
the 78s were made up of ground up rock called slate.
Wow.
Ground into a fine powder, then mixed with shellac.
Right.
The heat was applied in a round mold.
Right.
And the master recording with the grooves sticking out was then pressed onto this warm shellac slate mix, which then made the actual grooves in the record where the sound was recorded.
So those shellacs, do they have covers with them with illustrations? Or
No.
are they just in a sleeve?
Yeah, they were just sold in a sleeve.
Do you have 16s?
16-inch.
No,
records?
16 RPM. Do you have any of those?
Oh no, those were for spoken word. Those came
those
out.
are only for spoken word, huh?
Yeah, those came
didn't
out
know
in
that.
in the later 40s.
But why can't you record music if you can record spoken word for 16s?
Well, the problem with the record groove, it's a lateral groove.
Right.
And when you start getting down to really slow RPMs like 16, you lose a lot of the fidelity.
Right.
And especially,
But wasn't there a lot of low fidelity stuff in the old days anyways?
it was even lower sounding if
even
they
lower.
tried to play it slower. Like RCA in 1932 came out with a 33 and a third RPM record
Right.
with 78 groove size,
Right.
and it would play about 20 minutes to a 10-inch record.
Right.
But when you got down to that speed, the granules of slate in the shellac mixture started to interfere with the higher notes because the notes, the vibrations of the notes, cycles per second, were starting to approach the cycles per second of the granules passing under the needle. So it just caused some interference.
So do 78s have a better, warmer, richer sound than 33s? 33 and a third?
No,
So they're not really. They're just relics now. They're not really like you wouldn't put it on for high fidelity then 78s.
no, high fidelity didn't come out until early 50s. And then many collectors think the best recorded sound was the mono or early stereo of, say, 1958, 59, 60. Was all run through tube equipment.
And then it all was downhill after that, right?
Yeah, because the tubes and the equipment of the time, the bell curve of frequency response, lows, middles, highs, matches human hearing quite well. When you get into a solid state, the transistor stuff, it goes up very sharply into the highs. So it tends to sound a little screechy.
Yeah, that doesn't sound screechy. Sounds like a bad hearing experience.
Yeah.
So it was basically things were good in the late 50s, and then after that, what happened? Bad stereo came in.
Well, the early stereo was good because it was run through tube equipment.
But after that, it was.
Yeah, once they went to solid state and different kinds of.
But why would they do
microphones.
that? Why would didn't they know that it was worse?
I think the emphasis was on the higher frequencies. The
Right.
guitars. I mean, listen to Jimi Hendrix playing one of his screaming solos.
Right.
You know, I mean, he's not down there sweet and mellow.
No. You never wanted to play that kind of music, like the Jimi Hendrix music? It never occurred to you to get out there and... Well, you play more than clarinet, though, right?
I play all the different saxophones.
Right.
And I've sat in with some bands that actually played progressive jazz. I even played free jazz one time, which is just...
Screwing around?
Yeah, a lot of fast notes, honking, squeaking.
And that's why you only did it once, then?
Yeah, it was fun for 10 minutes, but then it all sort of sounds the same after a while.
Well, you're a disciplined type musician, right?
I tend to like things that are melodic enough that after somebody hears you play, they can walk out of a concert going, yeah, I like that, like doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. Other than like 20th century avant-garde symphony music and free jazz, you walk out of a concert with a feeling.
Yeah. You're not
Usually-
humming a tune.
Right, and it's usually nervous.
A nervous feeling.
Yeah,
Like
because
in your gutty-wuddy.
well, it's a commentary on the violence of the civil rights era, or it's a commentary on World Wars I and II in terms of avant-garde symphony music.
So you're not a Stravinsky fan?
I like some of his stuff. I like the earlier stuff. I helped him write Firebird Suite in
You did?
1912. Yes.
Wow. And you were born in 1800 sometime, right?
Yes, the later 1800s.
The later, you can't remember what year.
Now,
Just the later 1800s.
Charlie Chaplin and I were the best of friends. We grew up
You
together.
and Charlie were good friends.
Yeah.
But he was British, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, I lived in London at that time.
And you were good friends with Charlie Chaplin. Did you enjoy his film career later?
Yes, he did. And our secret to long life
Yeah. What's the secret to
was
long life?
we both started drinking Diet Coke
Right.
in 1891.
And did that have cocaine in it at the time?
Probably.
There was Diet Coke in 1891.
Sure.
People were trying to figure out, how to lose weight.
And then Charlie Chaplin quit drinking Diet Coke
Right.
in the 1950s, and look how old he got suddenly.
Well, but wasn't the fact that he was pretty old by then? Didn't that play into it?
I'm just as old.
Well, yeah, that's right. You're as old as Charlie Chaplin. You look
That's
pretty
right.
damn good for your age.
That's right.
Oh my God! So I did want to ask you about a couple of things since you're so old. Like, did you enjoy Adolf Hitler? Enjoy his work?
I didn't
How did you react to it?
I didn't like what he did,
Right.
but when he was my neighbor in Berlin in the late 1920s,
Right before he became chancellor.
yeah, I actually had guided him into pacifism and Buddhism
Wow.
and
Yeah.
and just loving people and
Right.
playing jazz
Yeah.
and painting.
And painting,
But when I moved
the arts and the pacifism, right?
But when I moved out of Berlin, he just went all to hell.
So if you stayed neighbors with Adolf Hitler, then possibly it would have been a whole different situation in the 20th century. You left, and he went a little berserk.
I stopped reading the newspapers in the mid-30s. Did something bad happen?
Well, when he, after you were his neighbor, he became chancellor of Germany, and then some bad stuff happened. Well, I think it's bad. Maybe you missed all that. You missed out like the way you missed most pop music since 1964.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been kind of out of it. You're not the kind of person who likes to keep informed on the current events. That's what I'm getting out of this.
Well, somebody told me. I mean, I remember the Great War
Right.
of 1914 to 18.
Did you fight in that?
Yes, I did.
And did you kill people? Kill other men?
They sent me over with a megaphone
And a clarinet.
and a clarinet to tell jokes in German.
Oh, and then they would fall over.
Well, yeah, they
From
surrendered.
laughter.
They surrendered in the thousands.
So you killed your mentor who taught you clarinet in America by a bad joke, and you killed some Germans, and you had them surrender because of your bad
Yes.
jokes into a megaphone during the Great War.
I was quite useful. Now, somebody the other day told me,
Fascinating
I
individual.
heard the phrase World War II, and I said, there was a II?
Yeah, you didn't hear about that, right? And your
No.
friend, A. Hitler, he was involved in the World War II.
Oh,
Yeah. But the Great War, you were involved in the Great War, did
Yes.
And you must have felt good because you kind of, by telling jokes, you were a pacifist. You
That's
weren't
right.
shooting people. You weren't bayoneting people.
no.
No. And so what else has happened in your life since, all I can tell from your life is you were in the Great War, then you lived in Germany, right?
Well, being in a Great War was a real gas, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it was a gas. So you were in Germany. First you were in England in the late 1800s,
yeah,
correct? Then you were in Germany in the 20s. Then you were, let's see, you came to America and you met this guy who taught you clarinet. That's the kind of the story of your life.
yeah.
London, was it London? It was England anyways. England,
Yeah.
Germany, and then of course America.
But I was in America in the 20s also.
Well, part of the 20s you were in America, part you were in Germany, right?
Well, I commuted.
Yeah, on a boat?
Well, yeah, although my last commute was in April of 1927, I stowed aboard Charles Lindbergh's airplane.
Wow. And you made it, obviously,
That's
because
right.
you're here. Now, did he know you were on a plane?
No.
Oh. And that was the flight across the Atlantic?
Yes, and that's why he wrote that book entitled We.
The Brook, what?
He
We? Oh, he wrote a book called We?
Called We.
But I thought he didn't know you were on the plane.
Well, he suspected it
Oh, he suspected it, of course.
because he said he heard clarinet playing.
And who's more famous for clarinet playing than you, Dr. Jazz?
That's true.
Is it true that you invented jazz? That's why they call you Dr. Jazz.
I did.
Wow. So one day, sometime, I'm guessing it was early 20th century, you invented jazz? How did
Yeah.
it come to you?
I was playing ragtime,
Right.
and I said, if you reverse that da-da to da-da,
Right. Da-da.
yeah, it would
Be
was all-
jazzy.
It was all da-da from there.
Right. It was all done up for there. So basically, it's called jazz because your name is Dr. Jazz.
That's right. It was named after me. Well,
And-
I named it after me.
Yeah, you named it after yourself, of course, because you invented it.
Right.
And what kind of doctor are you?
I'm a doctor of jazz.
So did the doctor card come after you invented jazz? Your name was just Mr. Jazz, and then you invented jazz, and then you became Dr. Jazz.
Yes.
Oh, wow. This is complicated. And then after your friend taught you the clarinet, what have you been doing since then?
Well, one other thing about the name Dr. Jazz.
Yeah.
My name was Stanley Jazzinski.
Oh.
And I shortened it to Stanley Jazz.
Stanley Jazz, right.
And
Mr.
then
Stanley
when
Jazz.
Then when I got my doctorate, it became Dr. Jazz.
Right.
And that's where the term jazz comes from.
But you gave yourself the doctorate, correct?
Yes.
You taught yourself about, because you made it up and then you taught yourself further and then you got a doctorate.
Well, I own a large university in Vienna.
Of course you do. You really have a world class type thing going on here. You got the living in England, you got the living in Germany, fighting in the Great War, living in America, and of course you have a university of your own in Vienna.
The Vienna Conservatory for Washboard.
Of course. Which is, now can you use washboard in jazz?
Sure.
Oh, have you used washboard in jazz?
I taught Johnny Dodds, the great clarinet player
right.
from New Orleans. I taught his brother Baby Dodds how to play washboard and jazz.
Wow. And how do you pick the musicians in your Dr. Jazz and the Jazz Bugs band? They have to meet a certain specific high quality, I'm guessing.
Well, I grew up with all them, too. We all drink Diet Coke. Charlie was the only one.
So you and the guys in the Dr. Jazz and the Jazz Bugs have all been around since the 1800s. Is that correct?
Oh, sure.
And do you realize that you guys are older than most people have ever lived? I mean, you realize that there's a certain. Do you think so? It's got to be the Diet Coke that's keeping you going.
It is.
The Diet. So you believe that? So this is a great commercial for Diet Coke here.
Nobody,
the Diet Coke people. Do they know about this?
Nobody who has ever drank Diet Coke has died yet.
No one who's ever drank Diet Coke. But I drank Diet Coke. Well, I'm not dead.
You're immortal.
So if I keep it up, you have to keep it up, though, right? It's not just like drink Diet Coke once and then live for hundreds of years, correct?
Yeah, you have to go to a Sunoco station once a day and get one of those big cups.
Sunoco station.
Mm-hmm.
Is this is the gas station? Sunoco. Yeah. Okay. And you have I want to talk about your car for a minute. You got the Studebaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's that like? Is that better than the cars they have nowadays?
It gets 25 miles per gallon of gas on the highway.
Right. What about in the city?
In the city?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, you've never driven it in the city?
No.
Just on the highway? How do is your house right next to the highway?
A correction. It gets 21 miles per gallon on the sidewalk.
Sidewalk, right.
And that's how I get to the highway.
Right. Is it a convertible, the Studebaker?
No. So it's a two-door sedan.
Right. So you just go around with your sweetheart.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
In fact, actually, it belonged to King Henry VIII, who was a two-door.
Of course. He was a two-door. That's why
Yes.
it's a two-door.
And
Yeah.
I play a tutor.
Yeah, you play a tutor. A tutor. Yes, that's true. You seem to have been involved with a lot of the greats in history. The king, the chancellor, the most famous actor in the world in the 20th century, and of course Marvin, your mentor. Do you feel like you've led a real special, full life?
It's been all right.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And what do you think? What's going to happen? Heaven? Oh no, you're not going to die because of Diet Coke.
That's right.
So wow. So like I have to go back to my question then. Do the Diet Coke people know about this? Because this would be a great ad for them. Dr. Jazz says, "Live forever, drink Diet Coke."
I should make a 78 RPM advertising record for Diet Coke.
Or a shellac.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should. I mean, it would go through the roof. Wow. So when you play gigs, you're drinking Diet Coke, and you're pretty thin, so it must be working. You don't have to actually go on any other kind of diet though, because you got the Diet Coke. Is that correct?
Right. And that all started with a church council called the Diet of Worms, which was over 1,000 years ago.
Diet Coke started over 1,000 years ago?
Yes. It was originally made out of worms.
Right, it was Diet Worms then.
Yes, and the church sanctified that as part of their official diet for church officials.
Right.
Which is why many of those popes lived to be very old.
Right. Many of them lived to be about as old as you are.
And they fathered many children.
And they fathered many children. I think it's. You don't know when exactly you were born in the 1800s, though. Just sometime in the late 1800s, correct?
I can't remember being born.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And you were so young.
Yeah.
Right? Usually the memory fades. All right. Well, thanks for being here, Dr. Jazz. I'm Greg Sterlace. Let's put the camera on me for a second. I'm Greg Sterlace, and this is Dr. Jazz, and this is Dr. Jazz. Let's see. Here we go. And that's Dr. Jazz. And I'm Greg Sterlace, and back to Dr. Jazz.
Oh, I can say goodbye on the clarinet.
Yeah. You got 10 seconds, buddy.